Hey guys, welcome back to the channel once again. I am Robert Storms. As always, if you're finding me for the very first time, please be sure to click that like and subscribe button. So guys, yesterday was the big PlayStation showcase. The PlayStation 5 went on pre-order. I did not secure one. Thank you everybody for the notifications. I appreciate it. I personally decided not to pre-order one because of financial reasons. Okay, would I like to have one? Sure, later down the line, I would like to have one, but at this point, financially, I wasn't able to go ahead and purchase one on pre-order. Hopefully, I'll be able to get an Xbox Series X, but if I don't secure one of those, again, that's not a big deal. I'll just wait to the second wave or something like that. But yeah, unfortunately, financial reasons I couldn't secure one, so that's on me. But the one thing I want to talk about the most with the showcase was Final Fantasy 16. I am a massive Final Fantasy fan. I love Final Fantasy. I have loved Final Fantasy ever since I was very small. It's the franchise that I love because each new addition to the franchise has its own new story, its own new characters. Yes, we have like sequels like, you know, Final Fantasy 10-2 and 13-2 and Lightning Returns. And yes, we have our sequels within the franchise itself. But for the most part, the numbered games are always a new story. And I watched the trailer. Didn't know what I was going to expect with the trailer, and then I was pleasantly surprised that we're going back to the crystals, because if you're an old school Final Fantasy fan, the crystals had a huge part in the earlier games, and we kind of abandoned that a little bit later on, and we started becoming more sci-fi fantasy, where now it looks like we're going back to the core fantasy of Final Fantasy, and I love that idea. I love the fact that it feels like a more of a fantasy genre, sword and sandals type Final Fantasy game, rather than it be like Final Fantasy 10 and 13 and 14, where it was like very like mechanical based, tech based, science based, also having that fantasy element to it, and I love that. I love it. Final Fantasy X is one of my it's my favorite Final Fantasy of all time. I have the Xanarch and Apes tattoo on my forearm. Final Fantasy 13, I think it's very underrated. I love that game. The score is fantastic. I like Lightning. Final Fantasy 14, not 14, 15, I actually really enjoy with Noctis and everything like that. I really enjoy those games a lot, but I would like to see it go back to the core roots, the elements of the fantasy lore, and I like the fact that they're using like Ifrit and Shiva in like this new different kind of way, where it's almost like Ifrit is like a villain. Is like these crystals that are holding these summons are like the real beasts of this world. And just going by from what I seen in the little 3-minute trailer, it looks very unique, and I like what they're doing with it. It's fascinating. The graphics, again, this could be very early. See, the thing, I can't get too excited with Final Fantasy games because they'll show a trailer and we won't see the game for like 4 years, right? Like they'll show like Final Fantasy 7 Remake and we don't get the game for like 5 years. We would get like Final Fantasy 15 trailer, and then like 5 years later, it's a completely different game for the most part. Remember when Final Fantasy 15 was supposed to be versus 13? It was like Final Fantasy versus 13 or whatever it was. And it was supposed to be in that realm. And then like, no, we're just going to make this Final Fantasy 15. Yeah, so I don't want to get too excited because I love the trailer. And it's just an in-game cutscene trailer. It wasn't like no actual super gameplay in it, so I don't know how far along in the game they are or how long ago they worked on this game, but yeah, it looks awesome. I like the trailer a lot. I like the fact that they're going back into the fantasy element of it. Them riding on chocobos felt like Final Fantasy Type 0, which had this very like war aspect to it, using these kids and war and all this stuff. And it feels like this is going to be very like medieval, not medieval, sort of like a bad word, but more like you know, like the King Arthur time, you know, with that type of that type of fantasy. That's what it looks like they're trying to capture, is that type of fantasy element, which I think is fantastic, especially when you have shows like Game of Thrones that was really popular, despite what people think of the last season. Game of Thrones was very popular, so it would make sense that we go back to this type of genre. And again, it's something I think Final Fantasy needs to do, because we can only go to this like futuristic sci-fi tech elements in which we've been doing for the past few games now, which I love. Final Fantasy 9 brought it back to basics for the most part, you know, because we went with 7 and then 8. You started seeing where we were getting more into sci-fi. 9 brought it back to basics. 10 was pretty much in the same realm as 7 and 8, and then we seen how the games progressed over the years on these newer consoles. So with Final Fantasy 15 or 16 rather, I'm happy as a Final Fantasy fan that we're going back to the basics, and I really enjoy that and I appreciate that. Now it did say PlayStation. It said a PlayStation exclusive only, but in really small text it says also on PC. So if I don't manage to secure a PlayStation 5 by the time this game release, I'll just end up getting it on PC. However, I do think I will have a PS5 by that point, because like I said, they show these trailers and the games don't come out until like 2-3 years after the fact. So I do think like this is gonna be like a 2021 game. It is like not in, this will be like, if anything, it will be like a holiday 2021, if not spring 2022. So that's what I'm thinking the release date for this game is. It's not going to happen anytime soon. So I will sure as hell have a PS5 by the time this game comes out, because I would much rather play this game on the PS5, if you want me to be honest with you. It's just something with PlayStation and Final Fantasy. I feel like I have to play Final Fantasy on PlayStation, even though it originated on the Nintendo. But like, yeah, so I'm super hyped for the trailer. Good to see Final Fantasy still around. Like I said, it is my favorite video game franchise, right up there with Metal Gear Solid and Uncharted and Resident Evil and all those. Final Fantasy is the mecca for me. It's the thing that I love the most. I love the storytelling. I love the characters. I love just everything that makes Final Fantasy Final Fantasy. Huge Final Fantasy fan. So anyway, guys, that's my thoughts on Final Fantasy 16. I almost said 15, but 16 coming to the PS5 and PC at some point. I'm super excited for it, but I want to know what you guys think. Did you guys like the trailer? Are you excited for the game? Are you going to be picking it up when it comes out on PS5, or will you begin on PC? Be sure to leave those comments in the comment box below. Until next time, as always, I'm Robert Storms, and that's my opinion.